And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Schmoes Show. This is the first episode in a very long time where I have coffee. And it's pumpkin cake coffee. It's quite good. How are you doing this week,
We
Kyle?
we are in the pumpkin season for sure.
Oh, it totally
What
is.
was let me see if I can find this real quick. I was chatting with someone last night and they had a good line for it. I don't remember exactly what it was. They called it like autumn girl something
Autumn girl. Autumn girl season. Oh,
because we're out of the summer now. Oh. It's definitely that time of year though. It's getting cooler. I've been enjoying it. It's been nice to layer up a little bit more, not sweat all the time.
yeah. I think this is peak Michigan, if you ask me.
But it do be going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunately going to get a little bit warmer over this weekend, but well, that's just how it is. Welcome to global warming.
Global warming is the best. We get all this extra heat, we don't have to pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I love using my air conditioning in September. It's the best.
You're making me depressed now. Movies. We've seen movies. It's probably going to be a movie episode tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Movies have happened, yes.
Let's all go to the movies. So, Kyril, you want to start with the Meg?
Yeah, let's start with this one, and we'll go from there because this one's going to be a little bit shorter. But against my better judgment, I did see Megalopolis.
Uh-oh.
And it is. I'm curious to see where it's ended up. Actually, let me level check this. But at the time, it had wildly underperformed at the box office. It's doing shockingly better. I'm surprised it's even gotten this far. But the film was made on about $130 million of Coppola's own money that he got from selling his vineyard. Just rich people things, I guess.
I know.
It's only made about $11.4 million back. Obviously not doing well. The movie itself is extremely bizarre. There's a good summary that I saw of it in the Rotten Tomatoes review. That was just like, yeah, that was my experience. I've lost it now. It's really bad. Oh, here we go. So this is the thing, though. Unabashedly, absurdly theatrical, with boldly unnatural dialogue and performances, ostentatious imagery, and one extended cross-cutting sequence that is as potent as any Coppola has produced. They gave it a 4 out of 5. So what the hell? My review would be the exact same, except it'd be like 1.5 out of 5 on a real day.
It's like celebrity chefs. You just got to give it like extra points for who's behind it.
It really seems like it because what was it? The cinemaphile circle jerk that has gone on around this movie has been extreme and a bit disappointing. Like, I get that people are trying to be polite because it's Coppola. This is probably one of the last movies he's ever going to make, so they don't want to be unnecessarily rude about it, but it is an insanely weird movie from a design and direction perspective, where the casts that they were able to pull for this is second to none. And I can only imagine that the performances that were, accomplished in the making of this film had to have some amount of intention behind them, and it is just not good. It is not entertaining. It's not especially thought-provoking. It's like starting from a bad script conceptually, adapting it into a fine screenplay 20 years ago, and then only just now being able to actually make it today. And the direction is clearly not up to par of what it would have been when it was first drafted 20 years ago.
Interesting. Okay.
And the other side of it that's kind of disappointing to me is I've seen a lot of comparisons to the like so bad it's good kind of idea of it, like The Room, Birdemic, and there is bits of that every once in a while. The ending in particular, I think, gets to that level where it's just so like the last 15 minutes, everything happens so fast. The pacing is atrocious. The just like construction of the scenes themselves are just nonsensical at times. And then it ends on just the most what the fuck kind of note possible. So you get brief moments of that, but it's interspaced with like an hour and a half of this modern sort of Roman-esque like political thing that's just sort of happening, and it's just so fucking boring. The lowest thing that I can say about this movie is that in watching this was the first time in my life I have pulled my phone out during a movie that I was seeing in a theater.
Ouch! I remember that because
I have
texted me that.
never done that before.
Yeah.
But it was so bad and so boring that I didn't want to just leave, right? I paid for the damn thing. I had my popcorn. I had my drink. I was going to sit there and at least enjoy my food and drink. But it was just not a good experience. I would not recommend it to anyone. Unless you want to like dissect the disaster that it is. I think there's value from an educational standpoint in taking something that is so high budget, has so much talent behind it, from an education perspective and say, what is wrong with this scene? What can be done to do it better? There's value in that because it's pretty rare to have something this disjointed with flaws that are so obvious, right? It's like, oh yeah, you could have told him to do that line, read that line differently, or put the emphasis on a different part of the sentence, or cut this scene together in a different order so that it flows more as like a medium of storytelling. So there maybe is some value in that, but in terms of being a product that you'd want to go watch for fun, I don't think it's there.
Damn.
There is also some really interesting elements of it from a history and writing perspective, I guess you could say. There's a pretty now iconic H. Bomber Guy video that he talks about plagiarism. And one of those sort of like chapters, I guess you could say, of his larger video talks about a review that somebody was doing of monster movies that started to very uncharacteristically invoke the ideas of comparing the film to 9/11. And that was out of character, and it turned out that was plagiarized from another source. And there's very much that same sort of vibe here, where it's just like the imagery and the dialogue and the setting, obviously being set in some alternate near future New York equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
This is very clearly something that had a lot of the thought and the revisions made to it happening around and in the wake of 9/11. And being now 23 years later, those messages don't hit as well. They're much more awkward, where if this was something that had released 20 years ago as it was supposed to, those messages would have been a lot stronger.
So what you're saying is the film aged poorly before it was even made.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Absolutely.
What else did you see?
So now we get to have everybody get their pitchforks ready.
Oh no.
Joker, Folie à Deux.
That's a pretty alright movie.
I didn't. I really struggle to put into words my thoughts on it. And there's been, I think it's interesting how there has been a number of movies that have struck me this way lately, where I can look at the whole and I can point out scene by scene, like, I think this works. I think this doesn't. I think this is okay. This is really good. And there's a lot of that in Folie à Deux, where like the musical elements as a whole, I think are very 6, 7 out of 10. They're fine. They're serviceable to the story. I think they could be a lot better. And I'm a little bit disappointed that they weren't at times. I think particularly leaning into the fantastical side of it, allowing Phoenix, who, from all accounts, from what I was seeing, seems to have pretty good vocal talents in this. He's no slouch. Letting him and Lady Gaga just go a little bit harder, a little bit more bombastic, putting more energy into it to really contrast and set home how these are not things that are literally happening compared to how bleak and miserable everything else that's happening in this film is.
I agree.
And there are...
Oh, sorry.
And then there's, on the other side of it, there's times where things are obviously not good, right? There's scenes that feel awkward that should have had another, take another crack at it kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
And I do find that the good outweighs the bad. And it's, if I had to put a number on it, right, it's like 6 or 7 out of 10 on the whole. But I find it hard to recommend still, even with that.
I will say my biggest criticism is this whole movie feels like it doesn't want to be a thing. It's not like that's a bad thing, because there's still material here, but it's also kind of questioning, why do we need a Joker sequel?
Mm-hmm.
It does
absolutely
feel like there's a paycheck in it for everybody at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've actually thought of a good analogy for my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Where it feels a lot like going over to a friend's house and your friend does something where they've objectively made a mistake, right? They did something they shouldn't have. They, were roughhousing a little bit too hard and broke something, and their parents start yelling at them. And you're sitting there, and your friend is, because this is not your house, you're already in a little bit of an unfamiliar environment, and your friend's being yelled at. And then they keep being yelled at, and they keep being yelled at. And you're like, yes, I agree, they did something wrong. But what is actually happening here? Should this be happening the way that it's happening?
I see what you're saying. I think there's a lot to like about this movie, and if it had more time to film, or dare I say, a little bit more passion put into it, I think it could have been a very worthwhile sequel. As it is, it's fine. It's pretty much how I expected a Joker sequel to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And I think that's the thing that has surprised me the most, is just the sheer volume of people that seemed to go into this with a completely misguided idea that this had any chance of flowering into some kind of greater cinematic universe kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That's been the overwhelming surprise for me. This isn't going to go anywhere. It wasn't meant to go anywhere. And this one really does feel like a movie that was solely made to absolutely explicitly, at times almost insultingly, tell the audience, we're not doing this again. This is the themes. This is how we want this movie to make you feel. Don't expect this to go anywhere else, because it is not.
It's a commentary on the first film, almost, and the reaction from it.
Yeah. Well, and not even necessarily a commentary on the first film. It's almost like a commentary on the response to the first film.
That's a better way of putting it, yeah.
And I respect, was it Phillips who directed this?
Yeah. Hangover.
Todd Phillips, yeah. The decision to spend, what is it, $200 million to tell the people who who liked your last movie for the wrong reasons to go fuck off, I respect the hell out of that. I just don't know if I could recommend that as a viewing experience. Certainly not in the theater, right? I think there's value to be seen in this in the same way that there's value to be seen in something like Sicario, where it's like, yeah, this movie is not meant to make you feel good at any point. That's not going to happen. Don't expect that to happen. But there are themes and there are ideas here, and there are performances here that are still very much worth seeing, just in a more familiar, comfortable environment.
I agree.
Because there's a lot of stuff here that I could definitely see making a lot of people very uncomfortable.
It's a challenging ass movie.
Yeah.
Like, for example, where the fuck is Batman? I was promised Batman in the last movie.
I will say, my greatest criticism of this, I think, is that I really feel like they had a chance to make this more of a Harley movie, and I get why they didn't, because it literally has Joker's name on the title.
Yeah.
But I think that would have made for a much more interesting movie and left more room to say something new, to talk to parasociality and the pitfalls of it at the extremes, and the messaging of the movie with how it ends with, you know, spoilers. I guess we can do spoilers.
Yeah.
Having it end with Joker both no longer being with Harley, basically in any way, and Joker then dying outright, it says more to Harley's story than it does Joker's, where she is the one through this movie that has more of an arc, right? Whereas Joker is kind of, he has a story that he goes through, but he doesn't really change as a person so much.
No.
Not nearly to the same degree.
Yeah. I think of this movie more as... because it's not like an Arthur Fleck movie, but it is very much like showing how much the idea of the Joker got misinterpreted as to what it was, and less of there was an actual person behind that, and he was all too human at the end.
Something I did want to get your thoughts on.
Yo.
Have you... So the very end, of course, Joker is stabbed by one of the other Arkham inmates. He presumably bleeds to death on the ground. I'm curious, and I should actually check if there's been actual confirmation of what happens at the end there. In the background, as we see Joker dying, we see the inmate do something to himself with the knife that he used to kill Joker. I'm curious for what your interpretation of that is.
You see, I don't remember seeing that in theaters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Skip. I'm trying to look through the Wikipedia to see if I can get like a plot synopsis on that scene. Like,
so there's so the short of it though is that there's two interpretations of it, where Joker gets stabbed, is dying on the ground, and the inmate that stabs him behind him is either carving the Joker smile into his face, or what I saw at the time was that he looked like he was slitting his own throat to me.
According to the Wikipedia, he carves a smile into his own face. As I would interpret that, I mean, it's very obvious what they're saying. It's like the Joker legacy lives on. There will be more Jonkers in the near future, you know?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like Heath Ledger's Joker, that's like one of his big ass iconic lines. It was like, "You want to know how I got this scar?"
I have not seen that explicitly confirmed, you know.
Yeah. Well, I guess again, it's up to interpretation.
I imagine that it is, you know, more because the film, both of the films treat Joker as more of an idea than a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that being the case, where it's just like, yeah, Joker's not gone; it's just Arthur.
Yeah.
But it does change the interpretation of that last scene.
I did like how they made Harley kind of a manipulator in this film.
Mm-hmm. I really like that interpretation.
Yeah.
The idea, because you have Harley who, you know, in the canon is very well educated, comes from a pretty solid background, and sort of falls into Joker in a way that is a little bit, I don't want to say fully misogynistic, but has those sorts of undertones, right? The woman falling to the man and going into that crazed madness descent. And I do like the idea of that being twisted around where she is in more of a position of power and is exploiting or using that power to get what she wants out of the relationship, while still playing the role of the sort of lieutenant to the Joker character. I thought that was a really good take.
Yeah, I agree.
The main thing that did stand out to me in that is there's a brief scene where they show, I believe it's Harley in Joker's old apartment, something like that, when Joker is trying to call her. And I really did feel like some of those scenes where you have Joker in Arkham or in the courthouse, and Harley is explicitly outside of those controlled areas, that led to some of the more interesting interactions, more memorable moments. You know, Harley smashing the TV store window to take the TV with Joker on it. Harley listening to Joker leave a voicemail and she ignores him. There's just more happening there. We're in new places. We're seeing new things, new interactions happen. And when you go back into the prison, there's plenty of things still happening, but they're not, you know, you're not seeing new things as much.
Yeah. It's like this movie is a lot of good ideas. They may not come together in the best ways, but overall, like it's. I don't know. I think people interpret this movie to be way more of a so bad it's bad kind of movie. I don't know. It's mediocre at worst, but overall it's solid.
Yeah, it's the. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack on the uncritical review side of things, I think, with how people's preconceived biases as it comes to superhero movies, as it comes to musical elements, as it comes to, you know, just a story like the first Jokers and this one's, where it can be incredibly polarizing once you start to talk about, you know, authority in as explicit terms as it does. And it really does seem like it all just comes together and skews things a lot.
You know,
in a way that I can't remember the last time we've seen one that was quite this stark.
Kind of makes me realize just how much this movie was kind of made to be hated by the internet. Because it's superhero fatigue and musical, so you wrap that all together, I could see a lot of people hating that just on premise alone.
For sure. Speaking of other movies, though, there's one more that we saw.
We did it, ladies and gentlemen. We finally found the glass onion.
We did it.
I forgot how good this movie is until we rewatched it.
It's really good. I was
It's
incredibly impressed by it. The original Knives Out is phenomenal, and I don't think it comes quite to that level, but it is just by the thinnest of margins for me that it is below it.
That's fair. I think it's more non-traditional in how it decides to do its twist, and because of that, it can be
Absolutely.
very off-putting on a first watch.
Oh yeah. I I will say though, personally, I enjoyed the twist in this way more than I did in the first one. I thought they did a much better job, both giving you little bits to sort of, it is, as the first one was, a highly effective murder mystery where it
Mm-hmm.
gives you just enough where if you're really paying attention, you can start to figure out what's going on and piece together what's actually happening without outright saying it. But the actual original murder, so to speak, that they're showing you is still engaging enough that it pulls you in regardless and helps to distract you from the things that are actually happening. Um, Rian Johnson, I very much look forward to his continuing these series because he has done such a fantastic job with making a proper murder mystery for the modern day. And to see him do it twice so successfully is greatly encouraging for his next project.
I agree. I am
I am.
very
I would
curious.
say real quick.
Mhm.
I am so glad that he has beaten the allegations from his Star Wars movie.
The thing is, that Star Wars movie wasn't even that bad. It was like good,
No.
but it felt like it could have just been a different kind of Star Wars and not like a main
Yeah.
series, major installment.
Absolutely. Um, his one of his earliest movies, Looper, kind of falls into the same uh, writing tropes of subversion, and it's clearly something he has a very strong affinity for. And I was worried that when he did The Last Jedi, that he was going to get, sort of a brand put onto him as being the guy who ruined Star Wars, even unfair or not as that may have been. And yeah, just having him kick past that and keep going is it's wonderful. He's a fantastic screenwriter, fantastic director, and I look forward to seeing him continue. But yeah, Glass Onion.
Yeah. It's a real. The thing is, I saw this movie before I saw the original Knives Out, and that's what sold me on the original.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I will say I might think this. I think this one's better in the long run. Like Knives Out is more tightly written. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But I
it's
think
very
this
much more
one,
traditional.
this one I just find to be a more interesting murder mystery, and the fact that you can figure it out if you just pay attention to one scene in particular, the fucking
Yeah.
the David Bowie scene. Then I find that very rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Because like every time I rewatch it, I pay attention to that scene more and more. And yeah, he doesn't even switch up the scene or anything like that. You just got to pay attention.
Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, honestly, because obviously a lot of the production and pre-production for this movie would have happened during COVID, so that has both left its mark less obviously, or I guess more obviously, on the themes and the tone and the actual, like explicit actions that are happening in the movie. It is set place in that time. So there is commentary related to that. There is character interactions that you couldn't have without that. But it also has an impact behind the scenes. And both of those are present as you're looking for them. And I do think that there's an interesting question to be asked as to whether, if you were to strip that away entirely, what would be the movie that you're left with?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, have you seen Looper?
watched it when I was very young, and I don't remember anything about it.
Okay, absolutely. See it. It is one of the best modern science fiction stories.
Okay.
And I won't say more than that, but I have watched it probably a dozen times, and I adore it. It has, oh, what the hell is his name? Joseph Gordon-Levitt in one of his best roles, Emily Blunt in one of her best roles, and Bruce Willis in one of his last best roles. He is right at that tipping point where he's clearly starting to decline, and it wasn't public at that point, but he does a phenomenal job in the role that he is given. Great performances from everybody involved. Rian Johnson directs it phenomenally, and for being a sci-fi release in 2012, it has, in typical Rian Johnson fashion, some twists and turns that are genuinely unexpected and handled very well.
Badass.
And it's a joy to just watch it unfold and have the pieces fall into place.
I do remember watching it and thinking that it was above my little mind at the time. And I think I'm still like vaguely aware of some of the plot elements, but I think it's better I just watch it.
Yep. Also want to give out some of the actors in Glass Onion. Obviously, Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc continues to be remarkable.
Perfect
I think
casting.
that there's going to be a very hard to answer question in 15 or 20 years of like, who is the best actor of the 2000s? And he has to be in strong contention for that now that he's gotten away from the Bond stuff and shown just how damn talented he is in the range that he has.
I see that.
Shout out also to Dave Bautista.
Dude, he's like the best part of this movie.
He's so fucking talented, and I adore seeing him in more serious acting roles. Like, of the WWE stars that have moved into acting now, you obviously have The Rock, who is The Rock and is very popular for that, but has the depth of a puddle. Entertaining as that puddle may be. Dave Bautista, in comparison, has genuine talent as an actor and a shocking amount of range. Likewise, because I will never stop singing the praises of it, his brief role in Blade Runner 2049 is exceptional. And as an individual performance, I would not be surprised if that has secured him acting roles for as long as he wants to continue to do them, because he is just genuinely talented outside of just being a charismatic showman. And that is a rare thing from people cut from the cloth that he started from.
I do think he's the best WWE actor. By far.
Yeah.
And they kind of play up to that in this movie. Like the whole showmanship thing. One of my favorite things about Glass Onion compared to the Knives Out movie. Knives Out goes up more after the right in Old Money, whereas Glass Onion's more the left in Silicon Valley type bullshit.
Yeah, very much the New Money.
Yeah, the New Money. I find that so fascinating that they Dave Bautista's character is treated more like a pet, like a right-wing grifter pet.
Yeah.
It's
and
so
he
fun.
sells it so well. His ability to be subtle and quiet at times is what really rounds out his role, where he is able to give you these little tastes of, oh, something is not quite what it seems right here, because he's not just being loud and ostentatious 100% of the time.
No, because like in this movie, he's really fucking scheming at times, and that's what ends up, spoiler, getting him killed.
Right. Yeah. Wholly recommend. It is a fucking crime that Netflix has not given this greater theatrical presence and a damn box release.
Have you heard the new interview that came out with Daniel Craig about what Netflix told him about trying to get a physical release on this?
I haven't. I'm sure that they laughed to him in his face.
Pretty much. They put it in theaters for a hot second just to get like the recognition to be allowed to get an Oscar nom.
Yep. 1 week.
Yeah, 1 week. And Daniel Craig went to the premiere, and Daniel Craig said to the CEO something along the lines of, "You see, they're loving it. I think you should extend the theater run because people should see this in theaters."
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Well, that's not in Netflix's traditional business model." And Daniel Craig told him that was fucking stupid.
As he should. They did the same shit with The Menu.
True.
I would have loved to have seen that in theaters, but I didn't know it existed until the week after it had its theatrical release, and I was reading the reviews for it and realized, oh, this is something worth watching. And then I went to go and say, where can I go and watch this? And they just gave me a middle fucking finger. And said, nope, you can't. Wait 3 weeks and you can watch it on streaming services. And I said, great, you guys suck.
My biggest hope is that when these companies go down because streaming is not a viable business model, that the rights get sold to whatever studio is next in line, and they just go for the easy money. Just all 3 of these films back to back to back.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It feels like it'll happen inevitably. Either just with as many films as there are being re-released in theaters, it seems a bit inevitable that, they have these movies and people want to see them, so they are very explicitly leaving some amount of money on the table by not offering a theatrical release, even if it's just another limited one. Like, put it in theaters for a weekend, even, to hype up the next movie that you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Just complete stubbornness. It's gonna be we are getting into. I know we're gonna keep this a bit short, and there's not been a ton that's been happening this last week, but I do think it plays a role into it with just the way that these Silicon Valley giants are treating the markets currently compared to where the markets actually are in terms of the kind of money that people have. And it really feels like there's a greater disparity than we've ever seen in the past. Last night on the Linus Tech Tips WAN Show podcast, they were talking about the current state of the real estate market in their area in Canada, and how seemingly overnight how things have changed, where 2-3 years ago, if you wanted to buy a retail property, you couldn't. There was literally nothing for sale. And then this year, now, all of a sudden, there's been a glut of court-ordered sales of properties, of massive retail properties going up for sale, and it seemed like practically overnight there's been this exodus from the retail industry by very large companies. And then on the complete other side of that, you have companies like Google buying literal nuclear power plants to power their AI-powered slop. And it really feels like we're getting to that point of something really breaking, and these companies getting to start to do something really desperate a lot quicker than we thought they would.
Oh, totally.
Like Google is actually renting, leasing 3 Mile Island and starting it back up again just to power their AI, because that is cheaper than paying the current rates because they are using so much electricity. It's absurd.
Really,
and none of them have stopped and thought, hey, wait a minute. Maybe this thing that we're using the power of entire nation states on to make dumb GIFs, maybe this isn't the best use of our money and resources.
Goddamn grifters.
Last piece on this before we move on. This is, I'll say this to start, a pretty incomparable metric. The actual numbers behind it don't really stand up to much scrutiny, but it does make for an interesting comparison. At the height of the dot-com bubble, one of the greatest inflated stocks at that point was valued at what was at the time about 5.5% of the GDP of the United States before the bubble popped and their prices tanked back down to the prices that they were actually at.
Okay.
Currently, today, the total market cap of Nvidia is at 11% of the United States GDP.
I'm gonna
More
pretend
than
like I didn't
double.
hear that. That's
So-
fucked up.
Yeah. I don't think that we're going to see quite as extreme of a changeover as the dot-com bubble was, where there's this massive recorrection and things come tumbling down. But there's some inflation going on behind the scenes that are propping up these companies to a level that they should not be at.
Correct.
So, getting back into the movies, though, there's actually 2 releases this weekend.
Woohoo!
A little pair of Halloween horror flicks that are apparently pretty good.
Which ones?
In classic horror movie fashion, Smile 2 and Terrifier 3.
Oh my god.
We're not allowed anything original.
No.
Unless you consider the real horror to be Francis Ford Coppola's editing.
I could say that, but then I would get film Twitter yelling at me.
Yeah, both of these are doing overwhelmingly positively. Smile 2, 84%, 86%. About to embark on a new world tour, global pop sensation Sky Riley begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and the pressure of fame, Sky is forced to face her dark past to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. I remember the reviews coming around for the first Smile movie, and I didn't see it personally, but it does take a nice, it's a unique idea, at least. Plays on some good horror elements of, like, the infallible, or I guess the fallible self, and doubting what you're actually seeing to really fun extremes. And it is cool to see that they have taken the same idea, put a little bit of their own spin on it by taking it from less of a personal story and having it be more of a public figure kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And props to them for making it work.
Yeah. I support it.
Yeah. Terrifier 3 sitting at 74% critics, 88% for audiences. After surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and her brother are struggling to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind. But just when they think they're safe, Art the Clown returns, determined to turn their holiday cheer into a new nightmare. The festive season quickly unravels as Art unleashes his twisted brand of terror, proving that no holiday is safe. Much more traditional horror affair, I'd say.
Yeah.
So,
I was about to say, do you want to talk about the leaks?
let's go through it. Bit of a change in tone here, but the Game Freak data breach has been shockingly massive.
I remember the night it was all coming out. Like, no one believed it until, like, the beta assets started dropping all over the place. Supposedly, the story goes, 1 terabyte of data was taken from their servers.
Shitload. I'm curious.
A lot.
So here's a fun point of reference. A Switch game can have up to 32 gigs of storage on it.
Correct.
So that is many, many times what a finished Pokemon video game of the current year would actually have been. And they just zoinked, took it all.
Yes. I just found out Tears of the Kingdom's 18.2 gigabytes, and I'm wondering
Yeah.
how the fuck did they compress all that?
It's here's the thing, right? I say this with love because Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are genuinely innovative in terms of mechanic and gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Visually, they're not great.
Fair.
They do a good job with the restrictions that they have, but I can see where they get away with it. And honestly, I guess I say get away with it. That's not really fair to them either, because it's more the other side of it where the self-aggrandizing of higher and better resolutions, it has really sort of poisoned the well in a way where the expectation seems to be Baldur's Gate 3 level stuff now, and that's not at all fair to anything that the average game development studio is capable of, both in terms of their manpower or financial burdens. So, yeah.
So I'm of the opinion with this Giga leak, the Terra leak, I think we may have leaked too far this time.
I don't disagree. It seems this is a bit of an insidious thing, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a massive data breach at Game Freak, and included in that is a shitload of personal information about the people who work there. If this was any normal data breach, that'd be the vast majority that you'd be hearing about. That people who work there are at risk of their lives being upended by their personal information being stolen and potentially abused to open credit cards in their names, taking their, the usual shit.
Yeah.
But because they also released some weird, horny, unofficial, but technically on the Game Freak's servers Pokemon lore, it's really overshadowed that in a shocking way.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I think the beta stuff is cool. I don't really necessarily care so much about like the little art pieces they commissioned within themselves to like get in the mood for everything.
Yep.
But where I start getting uncomfortable is the fact that that stuff is out there now, and let's face it, the leaks are circulating all over the place. You never know who's going to get their hands on that shit now.
Yep. I do like I would hope, as a result of this, knowing that this information is in the wind, I would love to see the Pokemon Company or Game Freak be like, okay, people want to know this stuff. Let's make a big-ass art book with all of this concept art and just put it out there.
Yes.
I think that would be the correct way to damage control this. Turn it into a win for Game Freak and be like, hey, we weren't planning to release this. We know you guys want it. It's out there. Here's the official versions of it, so you don't have to look at crappy reproductions, compressed JPEGs. This is our concept. Here's some commentary from our team about what the idea behind it is. That is almost certainly not what they're going to do. But I think that'd be a really cool way to let them sort of take the control of the situation back and to help direct the inevitable discussions that are going to be coming out of this in a much more productive way. Being able to have them just be like, hey, this is what we intended for this, rather than having people speculate on it endlessly, will be a lot more productive.
I agree.
I was very amused to see, and I don't know why it is with this. It seems like there's something with traditional games and gaming companies where they just really struggle to broach their way into new formats, where I get like the exact same vibes from the leaks surrounding Game Freak's TV and film projects that I do with literally everything that Magic the Gathering, Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast has tried to do with that aspect of it. where it's just like, here's all of this stuff that's just been in development hell.
I wonder if all that stuff that Game Freak had in development hell is going to get canceled now that it's leaked.
Hard to say. I'd imagine some of it, just from what I was reading about it, probably is going to continue to move forward, but that's something that the industry as a whole could do better with. Just like, you announce something, if it's canceled, just tell us it's canceled.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to do that for your investors, but it's an easy thing that you can do to just keep the goodwill of your fans, right? Just like make sure that you're not lying to them or giving them false hope.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have for the show today?
I did want to mention, last piece here, I do really like the Zigzagoon leak. I can find it. It's not like a huge difference to the design, but just being like a little bit more raccoon-like, I think that's cool.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like super different, but
It's like
was
a little
neat.
more animal-y.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Last piece that I want to talk about is the fascinating exodus that I've been seeing to Blue Sky this week. And I'm not surprised overly by it.
No.
The TLDR is that Twitter has made their block function completely, not completely useless, but in the way that people actually used it, it will no longer function.
All because Elon really wants to stalk his ex and kids.
Hmm. Well, and also it means that if you block Elon, I believe it means that you can now have his tweets served back up to you.
Oh, Elon.
Yeah,
No one loves you, do they?
The stalking thing is probably a part of it, but you know, he owns the platform, so if he really wanted to, I'm sure he had workarounds. I think somebody told him the number of people that have him blocked, and he was just like, that won't do. We got to do something about this.
It was probably
That seems like where
number
his
of
ego is to
the,
me.
Like actual users and not just the bots. Yeah.
Yeah, but Blue Sky has been flourishing in the aftermath. Then I said, I don't think I sent this to you. The Blue Sky Furry Index.
Go on.
See if I can copy this. There is a direct correlation between Twitter sucking and new furries approved on one of the Blue Sky furry lists per day.
That's actually kind of funny.
It's amazing. There was a big spike in August when Brazilian Twitter went down and all the Brazilian furries moved over, and now there's another massive spike this week as Twitter slowly slides into actually being a unused platform. And as somebody who's been trying to use Blue Sky for a while, just having more people there is immediately noticeable as to how much more useful the platform is now. It's like actually a place where you can go and do social media stuff.
I will say that was
Definitely.
my biggest critique is that it felt a little, like a lot more empty than Twitter.
Yep. It was just small.
Yeah, just small.
And well worth a double check now. There's just so many more people. I think the number that I heard from was the 17th that this happened from the official Blue Sky account was that they had another 500,000 people sign up that day.
God damn.
Yeah. Doing big numbers.
I'm impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll start switching our tags over to Blue Sky too, because quite frankly, I'm about to leave Twitter. I saw something unforgivable on there the other day.
Yeah. I'll still probably... I'm not going to delete Twitter yet, because there's still a handful of artists I follow over there that haven't made the switch yet, but the number of reasons is definitely getting fewer, and I've absolutely noticed myself just spending less time there in general.
Same.
So,
Honestly, what I found is everything I'm going to Twitter for, I'm slowly finding alternatives for, which is definitely making me sleep a little better at night. Anything else now that we've advertised our blue sky overlords?
I believe that's all I've got.
Cool. I think that's all I have too. I know this was going to be a shorter one today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Miss Ryan, and catching me on Blue Sky.
And I'm Carl, and I've been Schmo.
This has been the Schmoes Show. Thank you, Tri-State Area.